Hello, welcome back to the Painted Mini. My name is Travis. I'm your host, and today we're going to be painting all of the Atreides nobles from Simon's Dune War for Arrakis. So I'm just kind of consulting my notes and my cards here. We're going to start out with Lady Jessica. So what we're going to do is we start off with just a base color green. I like to start dark and then highlight up if I'm using regular acrylic paints. So here I have angel green and water, just 3-to-1. It's just a base coat, so I'm using kind of a relatively cheap brush, not too worried. Just trying to get the paint on. I'm going to move on here and go to Dr. Yui. So, and I'm just going through and using that same base coat I mixed for all of these characters, trying to be efficient and cover them all with the same color. The joy of batch painting. At least in this batch, each character is unique, whereas that's not the case when you're doing the soldiers. But same thing, just a green base coat. Then I go on and move on to our young Paul Atreides. And he only has green on the underside of his cape. Actually, that's not true. He has a little bit on his cuffs where that his sleeves flip back on themselves and pin. I just got a huge swath there on his leg, but his rest of his uniform is going to be black, so I'm not too worried about the green. This coat in the back has a strange little split, so I'm just trying to get the inside. There's the cuff. It's almost just a little V shape. And again, my purpose in these videos and sort of my objective is to try to go through and paint a large game like this without spending too much time on any mini. And I make some mistakes and have to go back here and there, but overall I'm just trying to hit everything quickly, not be too precise. I have to keep telling myself that these are going to be one of many, many pieces on a board game, and if I spend too much time on each piece, I'll never get to play the game. So I am being very careless at times and sort of attacking the minis with a blunt instrument. Again, I'm just doing that same color, each one. I like the consistency of the art direction here where all other cloaks have the same little inner green. And I can only attribute Thufir Hawat having armor to the fact that he's just an absolute dandy. He wants all the sparkle he can get. I like how Paul has just the slightest hint of armor. He just has a couple little shoulder plates. So here I'm going and doing my first, I guess this would be considered my mid-range color. So I've just slightly raised value of the green. It's a little brighter. And I'm just going and hitting those areas where light would hit. Anything that's left in shadow just stays dark green. Everything else gets a little bit of this. In the Villeneuve movies, I was kind of disappointed with Dr. Yui. He just didn't have enough characterization, I guess, to where his whole story uh, never really comes through. There's no real emotional stake or anything. The same goes for Thufir Wat. I think he was leaving a lot of that out. A lot of people give the David Lynch Dune a lot of grief, and maybe it's because it was the first film I saw for Dune. Uh, I think his a lot of his characterizations are actually much stronger. Just continuing to go through and brighten up most of the areas that I hit with the previous screen, because most of those areas are going to be hit by the first wave of color. So now we have slightly brighter, so this would probably be considered my first real highlight. And now I'm just hitting the ridges, staying inside of what I'd previously painted with the previous color, narrowing it down to where I'm just painting less and less with each highlight iteration. But even in David Lynch's book, I don't know if the whole gambit, I guess like a plot gambit with Yui really works out, because the whole point is that if you're uh, from the Suk school of medicine, the reason that they are so trusted and so close to the royal family is because they are supposed to be absolutely beyond politics, incapable of deceit, incapable of lying. And had that been developed a little bit more throughout the series of novels, then maybe down the road it would make sense to have the Suk medicine figure betray somebody in the royal family. But it was a little odd in the first book for that to come out that way, because then what is the point? What is the history? What is the reputation of the Suk if they can still be manipulated just like everyone else in the universe? So here I'm using aqua alchemy, because he does have some extra little piping, and I do, I'll admit, a pretty sloppy job. My lines are not very careful, and I think my paint's a little thick, so I'm not getting very clean small lines. This is Gurney Halleck, his strap. This is the same highlight color as before. I'm just making another batch, going back, getting Jessica. All right, so I need to get the black. I don't want to use regular black, so I kind of want to use a dark purple. So I decided to use speed paint here to start it off. And it's a mixed bag. I wanted to use speed paint as like a base because it can kind of give a zenithal highlight effect to the mini. And you can see on these figures with the really smooth cloaks, it's really not doing any favors. It doesn't work that well. Look here on Leto, you can see at the upper part of his body, it has lots and lots of texture. And to me, that's kind of how I decide whether I'm going to use speed paint. If there's a lot of texture, I think it really works. But then when you get to these characters who have very just smooth cloaks, not so much. So the idea was I would go through and hit everything with speed paint. And then I would take regular acrylic and go over it in parts that needed that, hopefully leaving it to where I still have a little bit of that zenithal highlight effect. Jessica, she just has this little headscarf, so I'm just hitting it with the same dark purpley color. So you can see here I'm going over and doing a few layers because that first batch of speed paint is the hive dweller purple, is a little too light, even though I added some of the Gravelord gray to it. So essentially I'm just going through and kind of darkening, trying to get a little bit darker. But it did work really well for the textured, mainly the guys wearing armor. And we'll see that in the end. You can still see it coming through on the Gurney Halleck Duke Leto. So here I wanted to use speed paint for the bulk of the dress, just to see if I could get some interesting textures. So I'm using orc skin, and you can just see here with that amount of texture on that tassel, speed paint really picks it up. I think Jessica is one of the better minis in this set. Now this is just acrylic mix of black, matte black, and terrestrial titan, which is a dark purple. And mainly just getting the lower, sort of the inner uniform. And I'm going to leave that, for now I'm going to leave the top part just as textured with the speed paint. I am using this to go in and do shadows and leaving some of the highlight of the speed paint. If you remember earlier, I had a big swath of green on Paul's thighs, so it gets covered up easily with the normal paint. Okay, so now I've gone and This is the second green highlight. It's the same one we used about 5 minutes back. I'm really just going in and touching up some areas. I'm just kind of redoing Thufir's inner green here because I had covered over it with the black. That's about it for the green. I'm going to go in and kind of do the same thing with the black now, the dark color. So I mix a little bit of the terrestrial purple matte black. And this gives me sort of my mid-tone for the dark color. This is the highlight color, so now I've switched over to a magenta, Magecast magenta, which is a lighter purple. And instead of black, I use dark violet here as the darker color for the mix. So everything kind of gets bumped up a notch as far as value goes. And now I'm going to get in and do the skin. So I don't know, I kind of did this backwards. I start with the pearl skin, which is a lighter color. Usually I start dark. I think what I was thinking, often I'll start light or lighter than normal with skin because I'll go and add a wash. I will say the skin gave me a lot of trouble, and it's definitely not happy with it. Even though I'm working fast and I'm trying to spend the least amount of time possible on each mini to get through a board game project like this. The skin did not come out well. And one of the issues is, and I've had this with other paints, skin tones can be highly pigmented, and there's a tendency for them to go chalky. And I had this problem with the Reaper. And I'm not really blaming the paint. There are ways to go to fix it as a user. One is just put things in the right order, the right quantities. I think I just went too fast, too thick. But often what will happen is, especially like I'm in Texas and it's pretty dry, so a lot of times using these high pigment colors, I'm actually letting the paint dry a little bit on my brush as I'm working, not keeping it wet enough. And the other thing I would recommend, I don't even think I did it here, and that's part of the problem, is anytime you're going to use light color skin tones or whites, don't thin it down using water. You need a thinning medium. That'll help quite a bit. Here I'm going in with speed paint doing the ballast set because once again, the ballast set is full of texture. So the speed paint's going to save me a lot of time and end up looking pretty good. Now we're going back to our purple. Okay, this, I didn't show the first part. With the Reverend Mother, I had used the Hive Dweller Purple speed paint, and it just came out looking too messy. Again, it's good on the textured parts, but usually on cloth it doesn't always work. It just didn't have a very consistent look once it dried. So now I'm just kind of going over and darkening it up. Same with Aaliyah, I just want her in simple, dark robes. She's sort of on the prophet side of things, appealing to the fremen. All right, this is the exact same first highlight I used for green before. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go in with that in-between color. It's between the base and the second highlight. I'm going to go in and just use that color to smooth out the transitions a little bit. I'm not going to do real blending for a couple of reasons. One, again, these are board game minis, and I've got a lot of them to paint. If I actually went through and tried to properly blend all of these, it would take me forever. I also have children, and I have a career, so feel free to skip a step here and there, because what matters in the end is you have something that you're happy with, that you can live with, that enhances your game playing experience. Sometimes I'll use a shade or a tinted shade for the same purpose, just to sort of tie in the high contrast instead of doing a proper blend. Glazing kind of has the same effect, but to truly glaze is going to take a long, long time. So yeah, apparently I wasn't overwhelmed with the speed paint result, so I'm going to go in and just kind of touch up the shadows, the midpoints. And it's because these fabrics can be very smooth, and on a smooth surface, that speed paint doesn't really dry evenly, doesn't dry with a smooth gradation. So it's great for texture, not so great for long, smooth strips. I think the upper part of her dress came out great. There's a lot of quilting, like around her stomach. That looks great. Here I'm just kind of edging in those darker shadows. And I didn't show it, but I had to go in and make her hair red because that's kind of a big part of the plot. Now this is me just going in and sort of doing a little bit of touch up and detail on the minis. So here I go back and create my highlight color. And since I have abandoned the speed paint for the lower part of the dress, I need to go and bring those highlights up a little bit. And I believe for her hair, I used the Fire Giant Orange speed paint mixed with a little bit of hardened leather, so it's not too orange. I'm just taking that final highlight and going in and further smoothing the transitions. And I'm okay with a little bit of a starkness. You saw when I painted the Harkonnen troops, their cape work. I have a lot of contrast in those capes. I don't think everything in a board game needs to look hyper realistic. It can have a little bit of style to it. Now, I have another camera running here, and sometimes I'll cut to it a little more than I normally would. That usually means that my main camera wasn't focusing properly. I'm checking into some options now to try to improve that. I can't tell if my camera's getting worse or if it's because I run it through some software so I can monitor the screen, and I think that software might be hampering the camera's own autofocus abilities in some ways. I think it might limit the modes that I can use. So I'm going to check into that. The other issue is my cameras are all old. They were on a 30-minute timer. Whereas the new ones, finally, they got rid of that feature. And what they told us for years is that it was because it had nothing to do with overheating the camera, which is what they sell it as, that they have to have a 30-minute timer so your camera doesn't overheat. The other reason is because once you have your camera able to record for more than 30 minutes, it gets categorized differently. It's no longer just a camera. It is a video recording camera, technically, and it affects customs and import duties when they ship it in and out. So I'm pretty sure that we've fought all these years when technology could have been fine for the overheating issue, just because of companies trying to save some money on import. I'm sure the truth is somewhere in between the two, a little bit of both. So these minis have really good texture on the armor, so I like that. I could use the speed paint, kind of get a zenithal highlight effect, and now I'm just going through and sort of picking out the actual metallic parts and leaving the rest. So with those increased values from the speed paint on the regular cloth, it ends up looking more like a leather. And I'm just using a plate metal. I don't think I mentioned it in this one, but all my paint now, I'm just trying to stick to one brand so I can really get to know the paint. And right now it is the Warpaint Fanatic line. And then I supplement it. I use the speed paint. So now I'm taking a wash. It's a just strong tone wash, and going over where I put the highlight on the black. It's hard to see because it's black. It's a little high contrast, so I'm going over the wash, hitting that, and then mainly I'm using that dark wash over the metallic armor I just painted. I'm kind of reluctant to apply wash because more times than not it's sort of come back to bite me. But one place I definitely think wash earns its pay is going over that armor. Like Thufir Watt's outfit, he's got so much adornment. He's got these like golden wings running down each side. He's got armor. I don't know why Mintet thinks he needs armor. I'm just using that wash. She has a border on her dress. All right, that pretty much is going to do it. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. We are almost through with Dune, War for Arrakis. So I have one, maybe two more videos coming out. And then we're on to playing some games, doing some other things. Thank you so much for watching. And if you stuck through these videos, you're a trooper. I know these are long. But hey, send me some feedback, send me some pictures. Let me see how you guys are doing.